Now, this week, there seems to be an abundance almost of protests and resistance around the globe. Why is it happening? And why is it getting, of course, so little attention? Because most people don't cover the news, at least not international news. Here, let me take you through some of these. Kazakhstan. A new president was recently elected, and this is how the people there reacted. Watch. Mr. Tokayev won the election with 71% of the vote. Look at what happened on the streets. People seem to think he's too closely aligned to the ex-president, Nazarbayev. He was there for some 30 years, by the way. 500 protesters were arrested. All right, next, let's go to Hong Kong. Put it up. This one was really nuts. I mean, look at this. More than 1 million people take to the streets to protest an extradition law that allows China now to take Hong Kong citizens to face trial in the mainland. Not fair, say the people of Hong Kong, who feel like the days of China ruling over Hong Kong have long passed. And now let's do this. Let's go over to Albania. Can you believe this? I mean, all of this going on since Friday. These protests are because their elections were canceled. The president of the country recently stopped the election. That hardly ever is going to go over well. He said he had to do it to ease the political tensions. Thousands of Albanians took to the streets, some tossing Molotov cocktails at the police. And now from Albania to Moldova. The protest here seems, milder, maybe more peaceful nonetheless. Look at the number of people that take to the streets here. They were called after the pro-Russian president was stripped of his duties. Protesters have taken to the streets, but officially they say it could have been much worse. Still, authorities fear that violence could get worse, and in what is one of Europe's poorest countries. Now, finally, let's take you, staying in this hemisphere, to Venezuela. President Maduro has reopened the border to Colombia. Thousands of people immediately, it's like they knew it was kind of come or something. Suddenly thousands of people started crossing the bridge. They're going over there to buy food, medicine, and other household items. Police tried to organize it as best they could so they can get through. Violence has not occurred, but the situation obviously remains tense as U.S.-backed President Juan Guaido continues his claim, I should say, as the president of Venezuela. I know, it's confusing. Sounds like a perfect segment, doesn't it? All this going on in the world for John Jordan, who is, among many other things, as you know, a member of the Hoover Institution. All right. So, John, why don't we do this? Let's start with Kazakhstan, because I think a lot of people don't realize the size and the import of that particular country, both dimensionally and in terms of some very important geopolitics. Take it away.
Well, first of all, Kazakhstan is the world's largest landlocked country. It's the 9th largest in area in the world and has the largest border with Russia. It also has staggering amounts of natural resources, oil, gas, and a wide variety of metals. It's had one president, Mr. Nazarbayev, since 1990 when it was independent. But as an economy, it's done very, very well. By the World Bank, it was voted it was determined to be the 40th most business-friendly climate in the world out of 190 nations. It's had 3.5% or better GDP growth for the last 3 years. Demographically, however, and maybe this explains the protests a little bit, it's a very young country population-wise. Half of the population is younger than 29 years old, and they've never known another president. And Mr. Tokayev, while he's taking the presidency, the old president, Mr. Nazarbayev, is still retaining the title leader of the nation, head of the Security Council, and leader of the party, and he names the national capital after himself. So it really isn't a transition in the formal sense of the world, and there is not a tradition of pluralism or democratic democracy in the sense that maybe we understand it in the West, but there isn't a lot of poverty. It's been a pretty well-managed country, too.
I should add, and I don't know if we have a chance to have a map up. If not, many of you are smart enough. Everybody who watches this newscast is usually pretty smart, and you could Google it. But if you get a chance, Google the map of Kazakhstan and look why geopolitically, as John Jordan is about to explain to you, it is so important for Russia, whose chief export is oil. Right, John?
Absolutely. And Kazakhstan is an exporter of oil and gas as well. If you look at the map, you'll see it's situated between Russia and China. Politically, Kazakhstan has maintained very, very close relationship with Russia, but it's also been fairly friendly to the West and has had friendly relations with China as well. There's also an enormous pipeline that goes from the North Caspian all the way to China across Kazakhstan. So Kazakhstan truly sits astride east and west, and in addition to possessing vast mineral wealth, is also a route through which a lot of this liquid wealth, oil, travels.
And finally, since you mentioned China, what a perfectly opportune moment to talk about Hong Kong. Apparently, some of the residents there are teed off about the fact that the Chinese seem to be able to think that they can extradite any citizen there and take them over to the mainland and put them on trial. They say, no, 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 we're not going to stand for this. Explain that to us, John.
Well, in 1997, the UK, Great Britain, handed over Hong Kong to Chinese rule. At the time, there was an agreement between the UK that for 50 years, until 2047, there'd be two systems, one country. That Hong Kong would retain its special status, would be more democratically ruled than the rest of China, and retain a lot of its free market characteristics. Now, it looks like they want to change the law such that a person can be extradited, as you just pointed out, Rick. But the current extradition laws of Hong Kong are the ones that existed pre-1997. And China is not a country to which, according to that body of law, which is still on the books, can be a resident of Hong Kong can be extradited. China is seeking to reestablish its sovereignty over Hong Kong, and this is probably this is perceived by many in Hong Kong as a route to by which perhaps certain voices and points of view may be silenced in Hong Kong as Beijing reestablishes its dominance over the island.
John Jordan, as one of my aunts once said about me, he's handsome, he's smart, and he's got all his teeth. Thank you, John. We appreciate it. I'm Rick Sanchez. You found us on YouTube, and that's awesome. But you know what? I'm also live every night at 7 and 8 p.m. Eastern on DirecTV and Dish and cable and satellite, the RT app, and Pluto TV. I'll see you there.